In today's video, we have the latest NHL rumors focusing on players like Patrik Laine and Zdeno Chara. We also have a few more signings to discuss, and we have another update on what next season could possibly look like when it gets started. We'll discuss that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of things to talk about here today. Let's kick things off first up with a couple of signing announcements. Now, yesterday we talked about the fact that it was looking like the Oilers were supposed to sign Dominik Kahun, formerly of Chicago, as well as Pittsburgh and Buffalo. He's bounced around a fair bit here in his young NHL career, but as I mentioned yesterday, he's a player who's actually done relatively well. It's kind of a little bit mind-boggling why he can't find a longer-term solution to playing on one team for a while. So, of course, that official signing is now done. So the Oilers did announce today that he was signed, because when I made that video last night, there was no confirmation on what the terms are going to be. So it was a one-year contract at $975,000. So that's a pretty good bargain contract, really, in my opinion. I mean, Kahun is a player who could possibly be a 40-point player or better, possibly, for the Oilers, depending on where exactly he slots in the lineup. I really like this signing. As I mentioned before, of course, he's good friends with Leon Draisaitl. They've played together on the German team before. They've known each other for a long time, so obviously he has that connection to the team. Apparently, as well, the Oilers did reach out to Kahun's camp early in free agency, so apparently he was a player that they did kind of target early on, but he decided to wait on their offer because he was trying to see if there was any other offers that sounded a little bit more, higher paying or certainly better position or whatnot. But after dragging things on for quite some time, he's gone back and accepted the Oilers' offer here to sign a one-year deal. So we'll see how this works out for him with the Oilers, but I would think there's a good possibility that it very well could work out. It's pretty short-term, low-risk signing that could have some pretty good upside here for Edmonton. Now, with the other signing we have today is the San Jose Sharks signing Curtis Gabriel to a one-year, two-way deal. Pays him $700,000 at the NHL level and $175,000 at the AHL level. So that's a pretty rich AHL contract. We don't normally see a lot of contracts go that high at that level. Of course, he had previously played with the Philadelphia Flyers and now goes over to the Sharks here. He could very well be a call-up option. He's somebody who doesn't have a ton of NHL experience, but certainly still trying to find his way to see if he can find a regular spot. And given where the Sharks are at based on last season's poor performance, maybe he'll be able to squeeze in there and either grab a fourth-line role or, like I said, at the very least, maybe be one of their main call-up options so that he could get a decent amount of games. But let's segue now into what the NHL could look like next season. We have another report here from ESPN, including Greg Wyshynski and Emily Kaplan, talking about what their sources are telling them, what things could be starting off with next year. Now, it's looking like either like a January 1st or maybe a later January, like a January 22nd was another date that was mentioned in this article as well. It does also reference the fact that the NHL really doesn't want to go less than 48 games, but of course they would prefer to have a full 82-game schedule. Of course, for a variety of reasons, the less number of games, the less number of revenue coming through. And I also mentioned before, one of my concerns is if they don't play a full season, is that going to impact players' salaries? Or owners going to want to pay a prorated amount? And will the players have objections to that? So there could be some difficult times coming to an impossible agreement. I've also seen other reports indicating that the Players Association would prefer a full season as well. But a few other things that they're certainly factoring in here. Of course, there's a variety of things, but one of them being is what are the arena limitations going to be in all of their NHL markets? Are they going to have to go with regionalized play? They have a lot of different models that they're looking at right now. They haven't gotten too far between all the different negotiations and meetings when it comes to the NHL Return to Play Committee, the NHL itself with the owners. Like, there's not a ton of meetings that's taking place. There is some preliminary ones, and that's as far as we've gone because there's just a lot of information that's just not known yet that they can't really get too far with all those conversations. But the NHL as a league is still doing a lot of planning and projecting and have various models they're looking at here, depending on what information they have and what the health authorities dictate they can do. But I believe that they're really focused hard on at least having partial fans in attendance. Maybe it's only 25 to 30% capacity in the beginning of the year, but they really want to have it ramped up to be at least close to full capacity by the playoffs, because the playoffs is where they really make a lot more of the money as well. So obviously the teams that don't make the playoffs would lose out in that scenario too. So it's important for all of these teams to get some revenue. They're very much driven here by ticket revenue. So the longer these teams go, some of them, the ones that are especially less stable financially, I can't help but wonder what their long-term viability could be. I know the NHL can only help them out so much, and longer term, this could really have a major impact here. I know there's probably 3 to 4 teams that come to mind, especially looking at like the Panthers, the Senators, the Coyotes, just to name a couple. There's a lot of other ones that could suddenly be impacted as well, because most NHL owners obviously have made their money from other businesses and different industries, and it kind of depends on where a lot of that source comes from for them, because there's obviously a lot of industries around the world that are hit really hard right now and are not generating the way they used to. So they could be losing tons of money in other aspects too, not just in their sports franchise. But ultimately, the NHL here has to keep in mind about the Summer Olympics. But the other question is are there going to be Summer Olympics? Is it going to be, going off here as scheduled in Tokyo in July? So essentially, the NHL probably is looking at their main model of going from January to be done before January or July 23rd. So that's likely what one of the main things they're looking at. But at the same time, they're also looking at TV contracts and all that. So they have to work all that out with their TV partners. And there's just a lot of things that can happen. Instead of 48 games, it could be a 60-game schedule. But without starting until January, I just have a hard time finding how they can squeeze in 82 games without it going even further into the summer. But Bill Daly did allude in that article by ESPN that they don't feel that they're completely handcuffed here by that July 23rd Olympic start date, that they have different broadcast partners that they can work with, and that they could very well have some models that they're looking at here that could project past that. Of course, he said it may not be their preferred method or it may not end up happening, but they have to plan for all different scenarios, and basically they need to figure out what's the bottom line and how they can make the most money for everybody involved. They got to protect their business at the end of the day, and I guess whatever they feel is best that they can accomplish is what they're going to attempt to do here. So it'll be interesting to see. Of course, it could still be regionalized play in the beginning, and he also reinforced the fact that how they start to play in the beginning of the season may not be how they end. They could start with regionalized play and then have teams play in different markets as we go along throughout the season, as things change and as markets open up and as fan bases are allowed to return to their arenas, etc. So we'll see. There's still lots to be figured out, though, and it's certainly going to be a hot topic of discussion here in the next few months as they hopefully find a way to sort this out. One of the other big things, too, is that they want to be able to kick off the season after, when Seattle's coming in, hopefully on time, without delay, full season, obviously full fans in attendance and all that, so they need to kind of make sure that they're prepared so that they, by the time we get to 2 seasons from now, that they're kind of back on their normal hockey calendar and somewhat, returning to normalcy, because it's going to take a while to get there with all the things going on in the world that we need to be worried about here. Now, as I mentioned, when it comes to trade and free agent rumors today, I want to take a look at a handful of options here. I want to kick things off with Patrik Laine. Now, there was another article today from Sportsnet's Ken Wiebe talking about what his future holds. Could we still see a Laine trade or not? What's the likelihood here? And the general consensus is that the odds are certainly decreased quite a bit. The further we get into the offseason, the less likely we're going to see a major blockbuster deal. But as I mentioned on a few other occasions, the trade market's kind of clogged up right now, and it's probably going to take a blockbuster type of trade to kind of open things up. Because as you know, there's several players that have been in the rumor mill that teams would like to move, but they just can't find the right trade, the right partner to work with. And once you see one deal go down, that frees up some money in one place or another, and then it just kind of creates a domino effect. So if a Laine trade did happen, it could certainly open up the floodgates here to see some more trade activity that could happen relatively quick. But ultimately, at the end of the day, there's still a lot of the same teams rumored to be interested in Laine that we've talked about before. We've heard Philadelphia, we've heard Columbus, we've heard Nashville, and there's just not really an offer going to Winnipeg. That's something that they just absolutely have to consider. They're not getting that knock your socks off kind of offer that you just can't refuse and you really need to take a long, hard look at. So ultimately, in my opinion, though, if you take a look at the teams that are kind of well positioned here, I mean, you look at a team like Columbus, the Jets are likely going to want Zach Werenski as a starting point, top pair defenseman. Probably something that Columbus doesn't want to do. I think they'd like to build their future around Jones and Werenski. They're both a couple years away from needing new deals. and I can see that being a way for them to build around longer term. So if they don't want to do that, it's probably a no dice, because the Jets need a top rear guard in return, as well as a few other pieces, including, at least one forward that can be somewhat decent, or a couple of prospects or something to that effect. But likely a top D is probably your main piece, the focal point going back. You look to a team like the Philadelphia Flyers. Well, they're likely not moving Ivan Provorov. I mean, I'm not sure Shane Gostisbehere is going to get this deal done, because I'm sure that it's a conversation that's been had. And at one point, the Flyers were rumored to be heavily involved in Laine trade talk, and that Gostisbehere has been in the rumor mill for quite some time. So I'm sure that has came up in conversations and has yet to happen. So, obviously we talked before that there was talk about a combo package of like a Gostisbehere and a Konechny, for example, or with the Winnipeg Jets likely looking for probably a preferred package of like Sanheim and Farabee and players like that, but the Flyers not really being so willing to do so, which is why we haven't seen a trade take place here as of yet. And one team, though, to me that really sticks out, that makes a ton of sense, would be the Predators. Now, the Predators have $13 million in cap space. They only have to sign restricted free agent forward Luke Kunin, who they acquired from Minnesota earlier in the offseason. It's not going to be an expensive deal. So they're still going to have somewhere around 12, maybe 11 and a half, somewhere around their cap space available. So they have that ability to make a big deal. Now, the Predators were already one of the teams last year who really struggled to score, even though they had a lot of pretty good players on their roster who had a lot of offensive success in the past elsewhere. I mean, we've seen Ryan Johansson not really be that true number one center, putting up the points like they had hoped, really ever since he's been there. Signed an 8-year contract, 8 years, $8 million per year. Hasn't lived up to it. He's a good center. He does provide a lot of value to them, but not on the offensive level like he should be for what he's making for money. Matt Duchene jumped over there last year in a pretty big free agent signing. Had an okay year, but not to what he had accomplished the year before. But I said before, to me, Matt Duchene's a player that I think his effort level changes when there's money on the line. And then once he's got his contract, it did not surprise me at all. Between the way Nashville plays and the way he plays, not surprised we saw his production go down a bit here. But if you look at a team like them who struggle to score with some pretty good offensive players already in their lineup, you get Roman Josi, Victor Arvidsson, the guys already mentioned, but they already moved out players like Nick Bonino and Kyle Turris. They're no longer in the lineup. Obviously not with the team anymore. They did not re-sign Craig Smith. Granlund likely is not coming back either. He's not still out there as an unsigned player, but at this point, if he hasn't re-signed with the Preds, I can't imagine he's going to. So those are four players that are, even though they weren't really living up to their old expectations, they were still better than what they have in the lineup now. They've been replaced with guys like Brad Richardson, Nick Cousins, and Luke Kunin. And no offense to those players, but they're not going to put up better offensive numbers than the guys that are out the door. And they were clearly positioning themselves for a major type of move. They were going hard after Taylor Hall. I was part of it. They did not succeed. So to me, with what's out there, they either make a big splash in the trade for a guy like Laine, or they tried harder to sign Mike Hoffman. Now, they've been rumored to be in on the Hoffman sweepstakes here. Obviously, I think they're going to have to increase their offer, though. The insiders are saying that Hoffman's only getting $3.5 to $4.5 million contract offers right now, and he's looking for at least 5, if not 6. So they're going to have to up the ante here if they really want to have a better shot at signing him. But a Laine trade, to me, here's just an idea. This is not a trade rumor. This is just an idea on my part. I mean, we know that it's been linked before. There have been rumors that the Preds were interested in Laine. But how is this for a trade for you? Now, let me know your thoughts on this in the comments. I mean, what about a player like Ryan Ellis? Ryan Ellis is a player under long-term contract, $6 million. He can certainly qualify to me as somebody who could be a nice number 2 defenseman. Obviously, he's on a great defensively strong team right now in Nashville. Obviously, Yossi's not going to go anywhere. I know that they probably don't want to move a guy like him, but if they want a top scorer, they're going to have to give up something of good, strong value, and he would be that player. I mean, they still have, besides Josi, they have Ekholm, they have Fabro, they signed Mark Borowiecki. I know he's certainly no replacement for a guy like Ellis, but still, they have a little bit more depth now, of course. So put in Ellis, and they have some interesting young pieces they can move. What about an Eeli Tolvanen, who is yet to grab an NHL spot? Would Winnipeg be interested in his long-term potential? Do they want something a little bit more established? I mean, if you look at for what's established, you would think that they might be asking Nashville for, a player of like Arvidsson's category, but I can't imagine they're going to give up Ellis and Arvidsson. That's probably, from Nashville's perspective, too much. So would a player like Ellis and then Tolvanen and maybe Philip Tomasino, who's a really solid-looking prospect. Combination of that there, throw in maybe a first-round pick. So, like, maybe you get one of those top prospects, a first-round pick in a year or two's time, and then else, I mean, that might be a package that Winnipeg would really highly consider. I mean, at the same time for Laine, like, he's only got one more year left. He's still going to be an RFA, but is the Winnipeg Jets going to have a difficult time getting him signed? Are they going to basically be forced to move him at that point? It's just hard to say. I mean, so to me, right now it's looking pretty likely, unless one of these teams really up the ante, that we're not going to see a Laine trade. Is going to be delayed. I think it still could happen longer term. Just hard to say when. But for right now, to me, it's going to take a deal like that from Nashville to really come through and get it done, because the other teams just don't seem to have what Winnipeg wants. So Laine likely stays put, but I'd love to know what your thoughts are on my mock trade between the Jets and Predators there. Now, Boston Hockey Now is also reporting between Jimmy Murphy and Joe Haggerty that longtime Bruins captain, of course, we know Zdeno Chara, is still a possibility to not return to Boston. They're saying that right now that the Bruins and Chara are having a difficult time coming to terms. He sounds like he still wants to play. That part we pretty much know for sure. He's made comments before. He doesn't want to hang him up here just yet. But in the case of Chara, they're just not on the same wavelength apparently when it comes to contracts. That's what's apparently holding things up. Now, of course, with the Bruins, they still have the contract of Jake DeBrusk to look after here as well. And maybe they want to get all of their other business done first to see where things sit with the cap. That's a possibility. But they're reporting that if Boston is unable to sign Chara, that a team who would be pretty likely to swoop in and try to bring him in would be the Cup champion Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, when I first saw it, I was like, okay, I understand the interest. We saw what they did last year. They brought in a lot of good veteran defensemen on shorter-term deals, obviously like Shattenkirk and Shen and Bogosian, and that really worked out quite nicely for them. There's no shortage of leadership there in Tampa already, but there is a major shortage in salary cap space. And if they're having a hard time coming to terms with Boston and Chara, to me that tells me that they're just not offering enough money. And obviously that's a problem, because I can't see how Tampa could even offer him more money. They do have other business that they have to take care of first. They need to find a way to move Tyler Johnson and probably another player. They can't even sign Cirelli and Sergachev yet, so I don't see how they can make a play here for Chara. So this report, it's out there, that's what they're saying, but they have a lot of other dominoes would have to fall into place before they could even consider that. I mean, if Chara did leave Boston, I could see that being an attractive option for him, because I think he's going to want to go where he has a chance to maybe win another Stanley Cup before he calls her quits. But at the end of the day here, I still see him going back to Boston. I don't see Boston really undervaluing that long-term captaincy. I mean, he's been there for quite some time now, been a captain for a long time, really been a great leader, one of their better players that they've had in the last, I don't know how many years. So I just can't see them disrespecting him and not really giving him a fair deal. I think they're probably going to want to get some other contracts looked after first, like DeBrusk, and then see how they can fit him in from there. But for me, Tampa, I understand the from their perspective, the desire to want to bring him in, but I just don't see how it mathematically could work without them making several trades first, and we've seen how complicated that's been so far. So for me, I don't see it happening, but we'll see what the guys here at Boston Hockey Now, if there is anything to that here in the short term. So let me know what your thoughts are. Do you see Chara returning to Boston? If he doesn't, is Tampa a logical landing spot for him? I'd love to know what you think down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.